So within the idea of force vector specificity, we need to consider the exercises that we typically program or that an athlete typically has programmed for them, and the force vector relative to their body, and all of that relative to the demands of our sport, or of sprinting in this case. So, we already kind of went over that the concept of your body specifically adapting to the demands we impose upon it. So now we want to think about the force vectors that are incurred during sprinting. A lot of this information is taken from different people that I've read, and so don't think that I invented any of this. It's just me stealing it from other people who are much smarter than me. But this is sort of my interpretation and how I put it all together in my head. But there's a great article by Morin, who's a researcher in France, who looked at what differentiates different levels of sprinters. So basically he had one sprinter in the study who was very elite and who competed in the last Olympics. And then there were some other sprinters of varying levels, some that were at the sort of sub-elite level, some that were, I believe, collegiate level. But all of them were very good sprinters, but there was the definite level. The other thing that makes this really nice is it's pretty easy to classify sprinters because you've got their times and you can just say, okay, this guy's better than this guy, better than this guy. But what he did was take all these different sprinters and run them on an instrumented treadmill. So a treadmill that has force plates built into it. And there was also they were running with a belt that had that was basically measuring their force that they were pulling with. So it had some kind of force measuring device hooked to their body at about their center of mass. So the idea of this study was to take these sprinters and try and differentiate what makes this guy faster than this guy. Is he creating higher forces? Is he creating forces in different directions? Is he moving his limbs faster? All these different factors they looked at. And what they found was that the biggest differentiator between the best sprinters and the other levels of sprinting, or other levels of sprinters, was that the direction of their force was very different. So whether you're the best sprinter or an intermediate sprinter or sub-elite or wherever you fall in there, the thing that differentiates you the most is not how much force you create, but is the direction of the force. Now, I think when we look at this study and we apply it to the athletes we work with, one thing we really need to think about is the sort of external validity of it, and does any of this information make a difference when we're working with a 15-year-old soccer player or a 22-year-old basketball player who wants to improve their speed. And I think that it does, and there's an important point about improving the direction of their force. And how we're going to implement that idea into our training, but I don't think we should ignore the magnitude as well. So in the study they didn't find significant differences in the magnitude of different sprinters, but I think that's because their group was so homogeneous that the differences didn't really manifest themselves. But if they looked at a wider variety of athletes, or maybe athletes who sprinting wasn't their primary sport, maybe soccer players, that they would find some differentiation between the magnitude of the force you create and the velocity with which you run. That's kind of my opinion for what it's worth. But so when we think about the force vector specificity, we're looking at the direction and the magnitude. And based on that study and a few others that I've read, I think that, again, my opinion, that these are both important things to focus on when we're thinking about how to make somebody faster. I feel like it's pretty intuitive as well. If you create higher forces, into the ground, the ground is hitting you with an equal and opposite reaction. So those greater forces are going to propel you, with more force in some direction. And then if you have a more efficient direction, meaning you're working on this, then that's going to make you faster. That sounded maybe overly simplistic, but higher forces in a more efficient direction makes you faster. So now we kind of established that these are both important things, how do we take these ideas that we're going to train the direction and the magnitude of the force and insert them in to this idea of running mechanics where we're maintaining knee and ankle stiffness with the quads and calves and using our glutes and hamstrings as our primary driver. How do we make these direction and magnitude match up with each of these individual components to create this aggregate effect of going fast, going forward fast.